It wasn't only me. For some people, it came naturally. Some people were mystical without even knowing it. Over the years since leaving New York, I've encountered many such souls, most of them men, most of them of a humble sort. Drivers and dishwashers and ditch diggers, a handful of red-faced indigents too, and a scant number of fellows who held more audacious occupations. One was a pornographer, another a pickpocket, a third a luthier. Each displayed the same essence. I could spot it at once. I was drawn to it, as to my own reflection, and whose lives likewise lay in pieces, not in the tragic way, but in the lazy, voluptuous way of all true happiness. Lives of little ambition, but glad of it. Lives which for the most part were disinterested in material gain, full of debts and carefree poverty, and governed, when fortune favored them, by a well-nigh instinctual need to get rid of every penny as fast as they could. Within their bones, I suspect, they felt the advantage, in worlds crawling with avarice, that came from being the stone with no blood to squeeze. Lives that had let go of every possible legacy, without progeny or life's work, with neither gardens nor wives to tend to, and no caretakers of their own either. Lives that were, accordingly, hopeless, but in an emphatic way. Hopeless because the future didn't exist for them, felt to them like someone else's fiction. A feeling that tended to make them callous towards others, or wildly generous, or passive, and in a manner that sometimes could be confused with madness, for it was the same hopelessness, dear reader, that rooted Narcissus and gripped Hades' pale dead, a hopelessness that came from being transfixed by the present, like a process mesmerized by its own repetition, like Bolero by Ravel, or some looping dream from which a febrile sleeper cannot, will not, wrest himself free. Desultory lives, finding no square of dirt much better or worse than any other, and passing on with few people knowing it, quiet-footed as a bachelor farmhand, or a Gandhi dancer, or a stoop-shouldered serf from ages past. I mean in particular those who stole into their graves with little fuss and fury, leaving not so much as a shoe print of themselves behind, not even there where they lay at last, their faces dry and soft and doomed like moths in a tomb, never once thought about by anyone, much less wept over. Lives full of books and other solitary transports, though they could boast of not a single hat or wristwatch or tablecloth. Lives lived mostly in secret, in small and cluttered but sparsely appointed rooms. Lives of infinite substitutions, a saucepan for a kettle, a pile instead of a drawer, homemade rose water applied to any part whose stench needed covering up, Lives in which an idle afternoon, spent lying on the grass or asleep in a chair, ranked far higher than a day's dollar, or a steak dinner, or a good winter coat, though these last sorts of things, when got, were well savored too. Lives of liquor and other intoxicants. Lives adhering to no standard not their own, as free and dissolute as a brigand, the petty sins piling like timber, and as indifferent to politics and other worldly goings-on as a skipper upon a distant sea, shouting orders into the spray. Lives as unsubstantial, and as always already leaving, as the very clouds, or a spring snow, or a leaf underfoot. Lives just barely clapped together, just squeezing by. Every day a perfect miracle, if only they weren't yet thrown to the wolves. There floats not the captive tree, but the grateful leaf, says the old Eastern saw. And indeed there was that Buddhist-like gratitude to them. In their hearts they marveled at the fact that they hadn't starved, that no one had bothered to lock them up. When you just scrape by, beggarly and leaf-like, you can't help but thank the gods.